What if I tell you that everything you believe about money, wealth, and success is quietly shaping the reality you live in? And that even the smallest thought you hold about not having enough is already sending signals to your life that keeps scarcity in place, so that every decision you make, every hesitation you feel, and every glance at your bank account becomes a reflection of an assumption you might not even realize you are holding. Yet, it is silently commanding the world around you in ways you cannot see. And the moment you understand that your inner state is the blueprint for your outer experience, a door opens to a possibility that most people never even imagine, because they have been taught to chase money externally while ignoring the subtle, invisible conversations they are having with themselves, which endlessly whisper that there is never enough, that riches are for someone else, or that opportunities are fleeting and fragile. And these thoughts, repeated day after day, like a river carving a canyon, shape your financial landscape without mercy or warning. It is astonishing to realize that your imagination, the one you use unconsciously for worry and fear, is the very tool that can be redirected to craft abundance with the same intensity. And the reason so many fail is not a lack of effort, intelligence, or skill, but simply the unnoticed act of assuming that money, comfort, and freedom are distant or unattainable, so that your energy aligns with absence instead of presence. And while you focus outwardly on bills, limitations, and struggles, your inner mind is already scripting a story of insufficiency that materializes almost like clockwork, which is why it is far more effective to consciously cultivate a feeling of having, a certainty that what you desire is not somewhere in the future, but already a reality within your consciousness. Because the moment you inhabit that mental state, the universe begins to respond in ways subtle and profound, shifting circumstances, attracting opportunities, and even influencing people around you in ways that feel like magic, yet are merely a reflection of alignment between thought, feeling, and outcome. And this is why the law of assumption is considered so powerful, because it bypasses external struggles entirely and works directly on the root, which is your assumption, your belief, and the lived feeling of abundance that you allow yourself to experience. So that even when challenges appear, your mind interprets them through the lens of having rather than lacking. And this reframing transforms obstacles into signals, opportunities, and lessons that serve your wealth instead of diminishing it, while most people remain trapped in the unconscious habit of doubting, fearing, and assuming that they are not ready, not capable, or not worthy, which is the tragic error that keeps them spinning in circles while wealth passes them by. Imagine, then, if you could begin to notice these assumptions, catch the thoughts that whisper limitation, and deliberately redirect them toward the feeling of richness, not as a hope, not as a wish, but as a lived, embodied reality. And in doing so, create a momentum that accelerates every area of your financial life. Because feeling rich internally produces actions, decisions, and opportunities externally that align perfectly with that state, which is why the invisible landscape of the mind is far more important than any external circumstance, for it dictates the path of least resistance that money, resources, and success will naturally follow. And when you realize that your inner world precedes your outer world, you see clearly that assuming lack is the single, silent mistake that has been holding back untold wealth, freedom, and joy. And the moment you commit to assuming abundance instead, your entire life begins to reconfigure itself, as if the universe were simply waiting for your permission to prove that richness is not a matter of chance but a matter of alignment. And what you've been missing all along is not external knowledge, effort, or skill, but the subtle art of inhabiting the state of having before you ever see it reflected outside, so that each thought, each word, and each choice flows naturally from the truth of abundance that you allow yourself to embrace. It becomes even more fascinating when you begin to notice how much of your daily life has been unconsciously reinforcing the very scarcity you are now learning to question. Because the way you speak about money, the way you react to opportunities, and even the small hesitations before making financial decisions all act like quiet affirmations of lack that ripple outward and shape outcomes. And the irony is that these patterns often feel completely natural, as if they were dictated by logic or reality itself. Yet in truth, they are born entirely from habit and conditioned belief, which means they can be unlearned, reshaped, and replaced with assumptions that generate prosperity. And the first step is awareness, a deliberate tuning in to the subtle voice that comments on your worth, your ability, and the state of your finances. Because every passing thought that whispers limitation is like a tiny leak in a bucket that could otherwise hold abundance. And while you might try to ignore these thoughts or push them away, the law of assumption operates quietly beneath the surface, constantly aligning your reality with whatever inner landscape you allow to dominate your consciousness. So that even if you take deliberate actions externally, if your assumption is rooted in lack, those actions will inevitably meet resistance, friction, or delayed results, which is why simply trying harder is ineffective compared to the powerful shift that comes from consciously inhabiting a state of richness, imagining, feeling, and believing that the life you desire is already yours. Because when your inner state changes, your outer reality begins to conform naturally and effortlessly. And this is where most people falter. They look at money as a commodity to chase, rather than a reflection of a mindset to cultivate, which is why observing your habitual thoughts becomes a revolutionary practice, because it allows you to intercept scarcity before it shapes your actions, choices, and relationships. And the moment you begin to do this consistently, you notice subtle signs of change everywhere. Conversations that once seemed discouraging now feel supportive. Opportunities that previously slipped by now present themselves clearly, and even your intuition becomes sharper, guiding you toward decisions that are in perfect alignment with abundance. And the deeper you go, the more obvious it becomes that wealth is not a struggle to acquire, but a state to inhabit, a mental and emotional environment that, when embraced fully, produces external results almost effortlessly. Because life does not resist what is naturally aligned. It only resists what is internally conflicted, uncertain, or lacking, which is why the true wealth-building process begins internally, in the quiet assumption that riches, freedom, and prosperity are not something to wait for, but something to live in now, so that each choice, thought, and feeling begins to echo that reality outwardly, and over time, the accumulation of these aligned moments compounds into a life that feels as though it was created by design rather than chance. Effortlessly confirming the truth that assuming lack has been the hidden obstacle all along, and stepping into the alternative, assuming wealth, becomes not only a strategy, but the natural, inevitable path to a life that finally reflects the richness you always imagined but never fully believed you could have. Until now, as you start to internalize this understanding, you may begin to notice the countless ways in which your environment has been silently teaching you to assume limitation. From casual conversations about not having enough, to the subtle messages embedded in advertisements, news, and even well-meaning friends and family who reinforce a worldview where scarcity is normal and wealth is exceptional. And while it can feel frustrating to realize how pervasive these influences are, the remarkable thing is that now, simply by observing them without judgment, you begin to reclaim the power that has always been yours. Because awareness is the precursor to transformation. And the moment you catch yourself slipping into thoughts of insufficiency, you are already in the process of rewiring your inner narrative toward abundance. Which is why the next step is deliberate. To replace each thought of lack with a compelling assumption of having, imagining not as a distant possibility, but as an immediate reality, so that your inner dialogue no longer whispers limitation but speaks confidently in the language of wealth, opportunity, and freedom. And the beauty of this process is that it does not rely on external circumstances, bank balances, or other people's approval, but instead works directly with the one thing that is truly yours, your mind and its capacity to assume, feel, and believe. Because when you consistently inhabit the mental state of having, you begin to notice opportunities, solutions, and resources appearing in ways that previously seemed impossible, and even small, seemingly inconsequential shifts in your thinking start to compound, like a quiet current building into a powerful river, reshaping the landscape of your life in ways that feel effortless yet profound, while the world around you responds not to your plans or strategies, but to the internal reality you embody. which is why most people fail to manifest wealth despite their efforts. They act externally without aligning internally, as if trying to paint a picture without ever choosing the colors first. And so your next challenge, once you have gained awareness of scarcity's subtle influence, is to develop a disciplined habit of consciously assuming richness in every area of life, from financial decisions to personal relationships, so that every action, thought, and feeling becomes a reflection of abundance rather than lack. And as you continue this practice, you begin to experience a sense of empowerment and inevitability, knowing that your life is being shaped by an inner certainty rather than by the chaotic fluctuations of the external world, which is a revelation so transformative that it redefines what it means to be wealthy, not as a matter of accumulation or comparison, but as a state of mind, a lens through which you perceive opportunities, resources, and possibilities that were always present but invisible until you assumed them fully. Because once the assumption takes root, your actions, choices, and environment begin to align naturally, producing results that feel almost magical, yet are simply the logical consequence of a mind firmly grounded in the certainty of abundance. And the sooner you make this shift from noticing scarcity to inhabiting richness, the sooner the ripple effects manifest in every corner of your life, revealing that what you assumed internally has always been the true architect of your outer reality. Once you grasp the profound influence of your inner assumptions, it becomes impossible to ignore the way every choice, hesitation, and expectation has been silently shaping the reality around you. Because even when circumstances seem random or uncontrollable, they are in fact responding faithfully to the patterns of thought you hold. And this is where most people are blind. They work tirelessly, chase opportunities, and strategize endlessly, yet the unseen force of assumption continues to direct results behind the scenes, quietly reinforcing the scarcity they unknowingly embrace. And understanding this gives you a radical kind of freedom, because it reveals that no external condition has ultimate power over your experience, only the assumption you carry. And the moment you shift your inner world towards certainty, richness, and abundance, the outer world begins to follow naturally, almost as if your reality were a mirror, finally catching up to the truth of your inner state. And this shift does not require grand gestures or immediate windfalls, but rather a consistent, deliberate practice of feeling, thinking, and living as though wealth and prosperity are already yours. And it is in this habitual assumption that your life begins to transform. Because when you truly inhabit the state of having, even small decisions ripple outward with enormous effect, guiding your actions, interactions, and opportunities into alignment with abundance. And as you continue, you start to notice patterns emerging that you never saw before. Moments where synchronicities, unexpected opportunities, and fortunate encounters appear as natural consequences of your inner certainty rather than coincidence. And this is why the law of assumption is so misunderstood by those who look for immediate results. Because it is not about forcing outcomes or controlling circumstances, but about creating a fertile inner environment in which abundance naturally grows. And the beauty is that once this process becomes habitual, it requires less conscious effort, because your mind begins to instinctively filter experiences, people, and choices through the lens of richness, automatically discarding anything that does not align. And in this way, your financial reality, career opportunities, and personal relationships all begin to reflect the underlying assumption of plenty, revealing that the real obstacle was never external, but internal. And once you acknowledge that, you gain not only clarity, but a profound sense of agency, knowing that the invisible currents of thought are the true architects of your life. And every day becomes an opportunity to practice deliberate assumption, feeling, and certainty, until your wealth, comfort, and freedom are no longer distant dreams, but lived, unquestioned realities, effortlessly unfolding from the powerful principle that what you assume with feeling shapes everything you see and experience. And this realization is both liberating and motivating, because it empowers you to rewrite your story at the source, ensuring that every choice, thought, and feeling carries the unmistakable signature of abundance. And as you continue down this path, you begin to see that scarcity was never real. It was merely a habit of thought waiting to be replaced by the natural, inevitable state of richness that has always been your birthright. The moment you start to differentiate between belief and assumption, you begin to understand why so many people struggle to manifest wealth despite their best intentions. Because believing something intellectually is far different from living in the assumed reality of it. And while belief may provide motivation or hope, assumption works at the level of feeling and subconscious certainty, embedding itself into every thought, reaction, and choice you make. And the distinction is subtle but monumental, because one operates on surface-level hope, while the other operates as the very foundation of your lived experience. And once you begin to inhabit the state of already having, your actions become effortless extensions of that certainty. Opportunities that once felt scarce now appear naturally, and even challenges take on a new quality, becoming tests of alignment rather than obstacles to be feared. And as you continue this practice, it becomes evident that every aspect of your life, your income, career trajectory, relationships, and personal satisfaction, is being shaped more by your inner assumptions than by any external circumstance. Which is why the law of assumption is so powerful, because it bypasses the need for struggle, effort, or convincing anyone else, instead working quietly and efficiently from the inside out, reshaping your life to mirror the reality you have chosen to inhabit mentally. And the more consistently you assume wealth, ease, and abundance, the more your outer world begins to conform. Sometimes in ways so subtle you might miss them unless you are paying attention. From small financial surprises to fortuitous encounters that seem to appear by chance, all of which are actually the natural consequences of a mind aligned with prosperity. And this alignment is not achieved through external tactics, budgets, or strategies alone, but through the deliberate cultivation of a state of having, where every thought, feeling, and expectation reflects abundance. And it is this subtle internal commitment that allows manifestations to flow naturally, without struggle. Because the universe responds directly to the assumption you embody, rather than the wish you articulate. And when you grasp this truth fully, you realize that wealth is not about accumulation, effort, or timing. It is about inhabiting the consciousness of already being rich, so that your inner reality becomes the blueprint from which your external world is effortlessly constructed. And once you consistently operate from this state, life itself begins to reinforce your assumption, creating a feedback loop in which abundance generates more abundance, and every interaction, opportunity, and decision is filtered through the lens of richness, leading to results that feel inevitable. Inevitable because your mind has already established them as truth. And this is why understanding the difference between belief and assumption is essential. Belief might light a spark, but assumption fuels the continuous fire of creation that shapes every corner of your life, ensuring that what you experience externally is always a reflection of the inner world you consciously choose to inhabit. As you delve deeper into the mechanics of wealth manifestation, it becomes clear that the blocks preventing financial abundance are rarely external and are almost always hidden within your own mind, because habits, beliefs, and repeated thoughts form patterns that subtly sabotage your ability to assume richness. And these blocks often masquerade as practicality, realism, or caution, convincing you that it is responsible to accept limitation rather than embrace possibility. And while this might feel safe, it ultimately keeps you trapped in cycles of scarcity, repeating the same financial outcomes over and over until you consciously intervene and replace these internal barriers with assumptions aligned with abundance. And the first step in dismantling them is to notice them without judgment, to observe how your thoughts, language, and even feelings respond to money and opportunity. Because awareness creates a crack through which transformation can begin. And once you start deliberately substituting thoughts of limitation with confident assumptions of wealth, you notice a shift, not only in your mindset, but also in the way the world responds to you. As if doors that were previously closed begin to open naturally. Opportunities appear where none seem to exist, and solutions to old problems arise almost effortlessly. And this is the subtle magic of the law of assumption, because it bypasses the struggle of forcing outcomes and instead reshapes the very lens through which you experience life, making abundance inevitable, provided you remain vigilant and consistent in your practice. And the fascinating part is that these mental blocks are often deeply ingrained, formed over years or even generations, yet they are not permanent, because every thought you choose to entertain is an opportunity to overwrite them. And as you continue this process, you begin to sense a freedom and empowerment that was previously unimaginable, knowing that the limitations you once accepted were entirely optional, and that your inner world is the ultimate source of influence over your outer reality. And by consistently cultivating assumptions of wealth, you begin to notice subtle coincidences, fortuitous meetings, and unexpected solutions that appear as if by chance, but are actually the natural unfolding of the inner state you have chosen to inhabit. And the more you strengthen this inner alignment, the more effortless and automatic the manifestations become, until wealth is no longer a goal or a struggle, but a natural reflection of your chosen consciousness. And this awareness transforms not only your financial life, but your entire perspective, because you realize that the only thing truly holding you back was the assumption you carried. And once it is replaced with certainty, richness, and freedom, everything else simply falls into place, as life itself begins to mirror the reality you have consciously and deliberately created from within. One of the most overlooked yet profoundly influential aspects of wealth manifestation is the role of your inner conversations, because the dialogue you carry silently with yourself shapes every decision, every reaction, and every perception in ways that are often invisible but undeniably powerful. And these private words, whether spoken mentally or felt emotionally, act like a constant reinforcement of the assumptions you hold about money, abundance, and your own capability. And while most people focus on external strategies, budgets, or plans, the truth is that the inner conversation is the real architect of your financial reality. And the moment you begin to observe these internal narratives, you notice patterns of doubt, worry, and limitation that have been quietly dictating outcomes for years, often without your conscious awareness. And the key to transformation lies in deliberately steering these conversations toward the feeling of wealth, certainty, and possibility. Because words are not just sounds or thoughts, they carry energy, conviction, and expectation. And when aligned with the assumption of having, they begin to reshape your subconscious and, consequently, your reality. And the beautiful part is that you don't need to force these conversations or convince yourself with effort. Instead, you simply inhabit the state of already being rich and allow your inner dialogue to reflect that truth naturally. And as this practice becomes consistent, the subtle but profound effects ripple outward, influencing the decisions you make, the opportunities you notice, and even the way others respond to you. Because your energy communicates a silent message of abundance that is felt by those around you, whether consciously recognized or not. And over time, this creates a compounding effect, where each aligned thought reinforces the next, steadily building a reality that mirrors the inner certainty you maintain. And the moment you embrace the responsibility of directing your inner conversations consciously, you realize that wealth is not something to chase externally, but a living state to inhabit internally. And that your mind, when aligned, naturally attracts people, situations, and resources that confirm and expand your assumption, so that scarcity begins to dissolve, and each day feels increasingly effortless, as if the universe is simply responding to the narrative you have chosen to speak within. And it is in this quiet but powerful mastery of your inner voice that true financial freedom emerges. Because the dialogue you maintain in your mind is the invisible force shaping every corner of your life, ensuring that the reality you experience is nothing more or less than a reflection of the assumptions you consistently allow to dominate your consciousness. And once you fully internalize this, you are no longer subject to circumstance or chance, but rather become the deliberate creator of a life defined by abundance, ease, and opportunity at every turn. Understanding the difference between wanting wealth and feeling wealthy is one of the most transformative realizations you can have, because wanting implies a sense of lack, a future condition that must be earned or obtained, whereas feeling wealthy places you in the immediate experience of abundance, And this shift in perception has a profound effect on how opportunities present themselves, how decisions are made, and how energy flows in your life. Because when you feel rich internally, your actions naturally reflect confidence, possibility, and alignment, which in turn attracts resources, people, and circumstances that are consistent with that state. And while it might seem counterintuitive at first, the outer world cannot reliably manifest what the mind has not already accepted as real. Which is why the subtle art of inhabiting wealth is far more important than working harder, chasing deals, or striving for external validation. And the moment you understand this, you begin to approach life differently, noticing that even small experiences of abundance, an unexpected gift, a timely solution, a favorable decision, serve as evidence that your internal state is shaping reality, reinforcing the idea that wealth is not something to wait for, but something to live in continuously. And as you practice feeling rich in every interaction, thought, and decision, the alignment becomes effortless, because your inner certainty begins to override old habits of scarcity, doubt, and hesitation, and even challenges take on a new quality, appearing as opportunities to affirm your abundance rather than obstacles, which is why the difference between wanting and feeling is not merely semantic but a structural principle of manifestation. And once you begin to immerse yourself in the lived experience of wealth, your environment responds accordingly, presenting situations, relationships, and financial outcomes that mirror the richness you feel. And the fascinating part is that this state can be cultivated anywhere at any time, because it is entirely internal, independent of external circumstance, which means that even if your current finances appear limited, your consistent assumption of having already positioned you for results far beyond the scope of your current reality. And as this practice becomes habitual, the universe seems to conspire to support your inner certainty, creating synchronistic events, aligned encounters, and unexpected resources that effortlessly flow into your life. And with each passing day, the boundary between internal and external wealth dissolves, revealing that true prosperity is simply the natural consequence of feeling rich first. Because once you inhabit the state of having, every thought, word, and action becomes a continuation of that assumption, producing outcomes that feel inevitable. And this is the principle that separates those who chase money endlessly from those who live it effortlessly. Because the difference lies not in external strategy, but in the unshakable inner experience of abundance that quietly, persistently, and powerfully shapes everything you see and touch. Once you begin to notice the subtle mistakes people make in visualizing wealth, it becomes apparent that much of what is taught about affirmations, visualization, and manifestation is incomplete, because repeating words or imagining scenarios without feeling them as real is like drawing a map you never intend to follow. And while many people mechanically picture money or luxury items, they fail to inhabit the mental and emotional state of having them, which is the true power of the law of assumption. And the difference is profound, because imagination without feeling creates little more than fantasy, whereas imagination fully inhabited shapes reality, guiding your thoughts, decisions, and perceptions toward alignment with abundance. And as you cultivate this deeper practice, you notice that the outer world begins to adjust, often in ways that seem subtle at first, from small conveniences to unexpected opportunities, all reflecting the inner certainty you now maintain. And the critical error many make is focusing on the how of wealth, believing that external strategies or timelines are more important than the internal state that precedes them. And this is why manifestation can feel slow or inconsistent for those who ignore their inner experience, because the universe does not respond to desire, effort, or intention alone. It responds to the felt reality of your assumption. And the moment you consistently live, think, and feel as if wealth is already yours, your actions naturally reflect confidence, creativity, and clarity, attracting circumstances and people that reinforce your inner state. And this alignment creates a momentum that accelerates results, often in ways that feel almost miraculous, yet are simply the consequence of cause and effect at the level of consciousness. And as you continue, you begin to notice how old habits of mechanical visualization or wishing have been quietly reinforcing scarcity, and replacing them with fully embodied assumptions of wealth changes everything, because the mind no longer entertains doubt or hesitation, and your life begins to reflect a coherent, unstoppable flow of opportunities, resources, and experiences that are consistent with abundance. And the beauty of this process is that it works universally, regardless of your current financial situation, because what matters is not circumstance, but the internal reality you cultivate. And as you become more adept at feeling wealth as already present, even temporary obstacles begin to serve your expansion, as each challenge tests and strengthens your assumption. And with continued practice, your visualizations become living experiences. Your imagination becomes a tool of creation rather than wishful thinking. And your life increasingly mirrors the richness that has been present in your consciousness all along, proving that the real mistake in wealth manifestation has never been effort, strategy, or desire, but the failure to assume fully and inhabit the state of having in every thought, word, and action. It is also essential to recognize how deeply society reinforces assumptions of lack, because from a young age, cultural messages, media, and even well-meaning advice subtly teach that money is scarce, that wealth is difficult to earn, and that security is never guaranteed. And these repeated impressions condition the mind to expect limitation, shaping not only beliefs, but the habitual inner conversations that dictate behavior. And while most people are unaware of the depth of this programming, it operates continuously, influencing decisions, perceptions, and expectations in ways that feel entirely natural, yet are fully learned. And this is why breaking free from societal scarcity requires deliberate awareness and practice, because the environment will always reflect back the assumptions it has been trained to accept, which is why so many struggle despite knowledge, effort, and intention. Yet the remarkable truth is that these external patterns can be neutralized entirely through consistent inner work. By deliberately assuming abundance and aligning every thought, feeling, and expectation with the reality of having. And as you strengthen this inner state, you notice that the world begins to respond differently, with opportunities appearing where none seemed possible, people reacting in supportive ways, and circumstances unfolding effortlessly. Because life is mirroring the internal certainty you maintain, and the more persistent and consistent your assumption of wealth becomes, the more automatic the alignment, until abundance becomes not an exception but a rule, a natural consequence of your internal state. And this is why paying attention to media, social cues, and cultural narratives is critical. Because while they can reinforce lack, they can also serve as mirrors to reveal what assumptions you are unconsciously absorbing. And by intercepting these influences and replacing them with deliberate, wealthy assumptions, you reclaim control over your reality. And over time, this creates a feedback loop in which the outer world continuously confirms your internal state, reinforcing confidence, clarity, and momentum. And as you continue this practice, even the most deeply ingrained societal messages lose power because your inner conviction of abundance outweighs them. And you begin to notice synchronicities, opportunities, and financial solutions appearing almost effortlessly, which is evidence that the universe responds not to fear, doubt, or societal expectation, but to the certainty of the assumptions you embody. And the ultimate realization is that while society may constantly present scarcity as the norm, your conscious choice to assume wealth creates a separate reality entirely, one that is entirely responsive to your inner state, demonstrating that the law of assumption operates above external influence, and when mastered, allows you to live in prosperity and freedom regardless of circumstance, making abundance not only possible, but inevitable. One of the most fascinating principles to understand is how the mirror of your life reflects the assumptions you hold, because everything you see, experience, and encounter is a direct response to the state you maintain internally. And this is why it often feels as if life is happening to you, when in truth, it is responding faithfully to the mental landscape you have cultivated, and the outer world is never in conflict with your inner assumptions. It is a precise reflection, showing you what you believe to be true, whether consciously or unconsciously. And this is why noticing repeated patterns, circumstances, and challenges becomes a crucial step in manifesting wealth. because these are signals revealing where scarcity assumptions still persist. And the moment you recognize them, you gain the opportunity to replace them with conscious assumptions of abundance, imagining and feeling wealth not as a distant goal, but as a lived reality. And as this practice strengthens, the reflection of your life begins to shift subtly at first. Small wins, unexpected opportunities, and supportive interactions gradually build a narrative consistent with your assumption, until over time the transformation becomes undeniable. And the law of assumption demonstrates that it is far more effective to cultivate a clear internal reality than to chase external validation, strategies, or results, because the mirror will always adjust to match your inner state, aligning events, people, and circumstances with the certainty you maintain. And the beauty is that this process requires no struggle, manipulation, or force. It is a natural, effortless unfolding that occurs when the mind is coherent and aligned with the assumption of having. And as you deepen this practice, you begin to notice that even the smallest changes in thought or feeling produce measurable differences in your environment, reinforcing the idea that reality is responsive, not arbitrary. And the more consistently you embody the state of wealth, the faster and more precise the reflection becomes, until every aspect of your life, from finances to relationships, from opportunities to personal satisfaction, mirrors the abundance you assume internally. And this understanding also brings a profound sense of empowerment, because it shifts the locus of control from external circumstances to the invisible yet infinitely potent realm of consciousness, allowing you to navigate life confidently, knowing that whatever you choose to assume with feeling will inevitably manifest. And as your assumptions grow richer, more detailed, and more convincing, the mirror of your life becomes a living testament to the law of assumption, proving that the only real obstacle to wealth has always been the assumptions you are unknowingly holding. And once replaced with deliberate, consistent, and fully felt assumptions of richness, life itself becomes the effortless reflection of the abundance that has always existed within you. The speed at which manifestations occur is directly tied to the clarity and intensity of your assumptions, because vague, uncertain, or half-hearted assumptions create hesitation in your subconscious, which in turn delays the alignment of external circumstances. And this is why people often wonder why they tried everything, but nothing seems to work, when in reality the issue has never been effort, strategy, or timing, but the absence of a clear, unwavering internal assumption. And as you begin to refine your focus, deliberately imagining wealth, ease, and abundance as a present reality, you notice a marked acceleration in opportunities, insights, and solutions, because the subconscious mind responds immediately to clarity and consistency. And once it perceives the state of having as undeniable truth, it orchestrates events and circumstances that reflect that assumption, often in ways that feel like serendipity or luck, yet are simply the natural outcome of energetic alignment. And the fascinating part is that manifestation does not require perfection or exhaustive effort, only the persistent, deliberate inhabitation of the desired state. And even small shifts in thought or feeling can create cascading effects, as each aligned assumption reinforces the next, producing momentum that amplifies results. And the more vividly and consistently you assume wealth, the faster the subconscious organizes life around that assumption, generating opportunities, ideas, and encounters that confirm your internal state. And this acceleration is not linear, but exponential, because every experience that aligns with your assumption strengthens belief, expectation, and feeling, which in turn attracts more aligned experiences, creating a self-sustaining cycle of abundance. And while external circumstances may fluctuate, the inner state remains steady, acting as an anchor that ensures manifestations are inevitable. And the moment you fully grasp this principle, you begin to approach life with a sense of effortless certainty, knowing that the timing, resources, and solutions you need are already responding to the state you maintain. And this understanding transforms not only your financial outcomes, but also your sense of personal power and freedom, because it reveals that your reality is malleable, responsive, and directly shaped by the assumptions you cultivate. And as this practice deepens, every decision, action, and interaction becomes a reflection of the inner certainty you hold, producing results that feel automatic, natural, and aligned, until abundance is no longer a goal or hope, but a living, undeniable reality, proving that clarity of assumption is the true accelerator in the manifestation process. And the more consistent, vivid, and emotionally felt your assumption becomes, the faster life responds, confirming that speed is a function of alignment rather than effort, struggle, or external conditions. And once mastered, it allows you to move through life with confidence, ease, and certainty, knowing that every aspect of your experience is shaped in accordance with the clear, fully inhabited reality you assume internally. Shifting from assuming lack to fully embracing riches in your mind is both an art and a discipline, because it requires constant awareness of thoughts, feelings, and habitual reactions. And while the shift may seem subtle at first, its effects are profound and far-reaching, because every decision you make, every opportunity you notice, and every outcome you experience is filtered through the assumptions you maintain internally. And when those assumptions are aligned with abundance, the outer world begins to rearrange itself effortlessly to match your internal reality. And the key to this transformation lies in deliberate practice, consistently choosing to inhabit the feeling of having, rather than the worry of not having, because the subconscious mind responds immediately and faithfully to what it perceives as true. And the moment you cultivate this state, you notice that challenges no longer appear as threats, but as signals guiding you to refine and strengthen your assumption. And this perspective change turns obstacles into catalysts, setbacks into lessons, and delays into opportunities for growth, while reinforcing the certainty that wealth is not something to pursue, but something to inhabit. And as your inner alignment deepens, the external world naturally reflects your state, presenting circumstances, resources, and people that mirror your inner richness, often in ways that seem serendipitous, but are actually perfectly orchestrated by the law of assumption. And the practice of shifting assumptions requires attention to the language you use, the thoughts you entertain, and the feelings you cultivate, because these elements act as the architects of your experience, shaping the opportunities you see and the actions you take. And over time, the habit of assuming wealth strengthens like a muscle, creating an internal environment so powerful that outer circumstances effortlessly conform. And this is why deliberate focus, consistency, and emotional engagement are far more effective than external strategies or frantic effort, because the inner state determines everything. And as you maintain this state, every decision becomes guided by the certainty of having. Every interaction reflects abundance. And every opportunity that arises aligns perfectly with your desired reality, until wealth is no longer a concept to chase, but a living experience, fully integrated and undeniable. And the more you practice this shift, the more effortless it becomes, producing a compounding effect that accelerates manifestations, deepens confidence, and aligns every facet of your life with the richness you have assumed, proving that the art of shifting assumptions is the cornerstone of effortless, inevitable prosperity. And once mastered, life itself becomes a mirror of the inner abundance you consistently embody. Gratitude plays a powerful role in solidifying wealth assumptions, because when you consistently acknowledge and appreciate what you already have, your mind naturally shifts from lack to abundance. And this shift is not superficial. It penetrates deeply into your subconscious, reinforcing the state of having, which in turn attracts more experiences, resources, and opportunities that match the frequency of gratitude. And the remarkable part is that gratitude does not require waiting for wealth to appear externally, because feeling genuinely thankful for the richness that already exists, even in small forms, creates a magnetic field for greater abundance. And as you practice this daily, the energy of appreciation becomes a reinforcing loop, amplifying your assumptions of prosperity and making them more convincing to your subconscious. And when combined with deliberate visualization and assumption, gratitude accelerates manifestations, transforming the way you perceive both opportunities and obstacles, because each challenge now becomes a chance to deepen your appreciation for growth, learning, and resilience, rather than a signal of limitation. And this mental framework ensures that your inner state remains aligned with wealth, even when external circumstances fluctuate, providing stability, confidence, and clarity. And as you cultivate this perspective, you begin to notice subtle confirmations of abundance everywhere, from small financial windfalls to timely solutions, from supportive interactions to unexpected opportunities, all reinforcing the inner reality you have chosen to inhabit. And the more you consciously focus on gratitude, the more effortless it becomes to maintain the state of wealth, because the mind naturally gravitates toward what it values and amplifies. And in this way, gratitude acts as both foundation and catalyst, strengthening assumptions while also accelerating results. And over time, the consistent practice of appreciation transforms your perception of life itself, making abundance the default lens through which you see, think, and act. And this lens subtly influences every decision, every relationship, and every opportunity, creating a harmonious feedback loop in which your inner state shapes external reality. And the more ingrained this habit becomes, the less resistance you experience in manifesting wealth, because your mind now perceives abundance as natural, inevitable, and normal. And the culmination of this practice is a profound sense of ease, knowing that life will continuously respond to the certainty and appreciation you cultivate internally. And as a result, wealth ceases to be a distant goal, struggle, or pursuit, and instead becomes a living, undeniable, effortless experience, fully supported by the law of assumption, gratitude, and the clarity of a mind aligned with richness. Sleep becomes one of the most powerful tools for wealth programming because it provides direct access to the subconscious mind, which is always working to manifest the assumptions you carry. And while many people treat sleep as a passive state, it is in fact an incredibly fertile period where your internal assumptions can be solidified, reinforced, and accelerated. And the way you think, feel, and imagine before sleep has an outsized influence on the experiences that unfold. Because the mind does not differentiate between imagined reality and waking reality when it is fully absorbed in a state of feeling. And when you consciously enter sleep, rehearsing the assumption of already being wealthy, confident, and abundant, you effectively instruct your subconscious to organize life around that reality, which means that even while your body rests, your inner world is creating patterns that attract opportunities, solutions, and circumstances aligned with prosperity. And this explains why those who neglect their mental state before sleep often struggle to manifest their desires, because unresolved doubts, fears, or scarcity assumptions continue to imprint themselves, subtly shaping outcomes in ways that reinforce lack. And the secret is not to fight thoughts during this time, but to deliberately replace them with vivid, emotionally charged images of having, seeing, feeling, and living, as though your wealth is already real. And as this practice becomes habitual, the subconscious mind internalizes these assumptions so thoroughly that they begin to guide decisions, attract people, and create circumstances automatically, almost as if life itself conspires to make your inner world visible. And the more consistently you program your mind before sleep, the more effortless manifestation becomes, because the alignment has already been laid while you rested. And even daily challenges are reframed in a way that reinforces certainty, confidence, and abundance, rather than fear or limitation. And this approach transforms sleep into a creative and strategic practice, allowing your assumptions to crystallize without struggle. And over time, you notice subtle synchronicities, opportunities, and financial flows appearing with increasing frequency, which confirms that the subconscious is now fully aligned with your desired reality. And the most powerful part is that the state you inhabit before sleep not only shapes immediate results, but also builds a compounding effect, embedding wealth consciousness deeply into your mind so that it continues to manifest effortlessly throughout waking life. And as you refine this habit, manifestation speed increases, clarity improves, and life begins to feel almost predetermined by the certainty you cultivate, demonstrating that sleep is not a break from creation, but an essential, active period where the law of assumption works most efficiently, turning deliberate inner assumptions into tangible external results, until wealth, freedom, and abundance are no longer a distant goal, but a natural, inevitable reflection of the reality you maintain within. Your environment becomes a mirror for the assumptions you hold, because the people, places, and circumstances you encounter are drawn to the energy you consistently project. And while many focus on external strategies to create wealth, the truth is that your surroundings are simply reflections of the inner reality you cultivate. And this is why changing your mindset often leads to profound changes in your outer world, even without deliberate effort. Because the universe aligns circumstances to match the state of consciousness you inhabit. And as you begin to consciously assume richness, you start to notice patterns and opportunities that were invisible before. From people who offer support, advice, or connections, to situations that seem to fall into place effortlessly, all reflecting the internal certainty of having. And the subtle yet undeniable power of environment is that it continuously reinforces or undermines your assumptions. So surrounding yourself with evidence, inspiration, and reminders of abundance accelerates the process, while neglecting this aspect allows old scarcity patterns to persist. And even the most powerful mental practices are amplified when supported by an aligned environment, because the subconscious mind is responsive to all signals, internal and external. And as you curate your surroundings intentionally, your assumptions of wealth become stronger, more vivid, and more credible, guiding decisions and actions toward alignment naturally. And the more you inhabit this state, the less resistance you encounter, because the world now reflects the certainty you carry, making manifestation feel effortless. And while it may require small adjustments, like choosing who you interact with, what media you consume, or how you organize your space, the cumulative effect is profound, because each element serves as a reinforcing signal to your subconscious that wealth, abundance, and freedom are your default reality. And as this practice compounds, even fleeting doubts or old habits lose their grip, and you begin to notice a coherence in life that was previously absent, as events, people, and opportunities consistently confirm your inner assumptions. And the extraordinary realization is that you are never truly separate from your environment. Rather, it is a reflection, a feedback system responding to the richness you maintain within. And as this alignment deepens, the outer world begins to operate in harmony with your intentions, effortlessly supporting, guiding, and amplifying your wealth manifestations, until the experience of abundance is no longer aspirational but lived, continuous, and undeniable, proving that the law of assumption, when combined with environmental alignment, creates a seamless, unstoppable flow of prosperity that touches every area of life. Belief in your own worth becomes the linchpin for financial manifestation, because no matter how vividly you imagine wealth or how consistently you practice assumption, the underlying sense of deservingness determines whether those assumptions can take root. And without this foundation, even the most carefully constructed mental exercises falter, because the subconscious interprets lack of self-worth as justification for scarcity. And as a result, opportunities, insights, and resources that should be obvious may be ignored, resisted, or unconsciously sabotaged. And the first step is recognizing that your internal dialogue about money, success, and value directly shapes your reality, because the mind cannot manifest what it believes it does not deserve. And once you cultivate a strong, unwavering sense of self-worth, your assumptions of abundance gain credibility, consistency, and power. And this is why the practice of affirming not just wealth, but your inherent right to it, is essential, because it aligns your deepest convictions with the outer reality you wish to create. And as this alignment strengthens, your actions, decisions, and even casual thoughts begin to radiate confidence, capability, and certainty, naturally attracting people, circumstances, and solutions that reinforce abundance. And the fascinating part is that self-worth is not dependent on external validation, accomplishments, or comparisons, because the law of assumption operates internally, reflecting the state you inhabit rather than the circumstances you face. And as you consistently reinforce this sense of deservingness, obstacles that once felt intimidating are reframed as opportunities to demonstrate, expand, and embody wealth consciousness. And the more you embrace this mindset, the more effortless it becomes to maintain assumptions of having, because the internal architecture of belief supports rather than undermines manifestation. And over time, you notice a coherence in life where financial flow, opportunity, and success all align naturally with your inner reality, and the subtle power of self-worth extends to interactions, negotiations, and decisions. because people respond to the energy you carry. And when it signals confidence and deservingness, doors open that previously seemed closed. And as this practice compounds, wealth becomes not only a reflection of external circumstances, but a direct expression of your inner value, certainty, and assumption, creating a feedback loop where every thought, feeling, and action reinforces your prosperity, and ultimately the combination of assumption, feeling of having, and self-worth ensures that abundance is not merely possible but inevitable, shaping a life that mirrors the richness you have long assumed you deserve. Consistency and assumption is the invisible engine driving wealth manifestation, because the subconscious mind thrives on repetition, pattern, and certainty. And without consistent practice, even the most powerful assumptions lose their force, gradually allowing old scarcity habits to reassert themselves. And this is why intermittent visualization, fleeting affirmations, or occasional positive thinking rarely produce lasting results. Because the law of assumption requires continuous alignment of thought, feeling, and expectation, so that the subconscious fully internalizes the state of having, and the more consistent you are, the more rapidly your life begins to reflect the assumptions you maintain, until opportunities, circumstances, and even seemingly random events align perfectly with the reality you inhabit internally. And this is why habits, rituals, and repeated mental rehearsals are so critical. Because they serve as anchors, reinforcing the richness you assume each day. And as you integrate assumption into every aspect of life, from financial decisions to conversations, from planning to relaxation, the alignment becomes automatic, almost effortless, creating a natural flow in which abundance is inevitable. And the subtle yet profound truth is that the law of assumption is not about external effort, hustle, or chasing results, but about maintaining an unbroken inner certainty that wealth, opportunity, and prosperity are already yours. And as you practice consistency, even challenges that once triggered doubt become opportunities to reaffirm your assumptions, strengthening the internal architecture that supports manifestation. And over time, the momentum generated by steady, deliberate practice compounds, producing results that feel almost miraculous yet are entirely predictable, because the subconscious mind responds faithfully to repetition and certainty. And this consistency not only accelerates financial outcomes, but also builds confidence, clarity, and resilience, allowing you to navigate life with ease, decisiveness, and creativity, knowing that every aligned thought and feeling contributes to the unfolding of your abundant reality. And the longer you maintain this uninterrupted state, the less resistance arises, because the mind recognizes abundance as the natural, default condition. And in this way, consistent assumption creates a self-sustaining cycle, where wealth, opportunity, and freedom reinforce one another, ultimately making prosperity not only inevitable, but effortless, continuous, and undeniable, reflecting a life fully aligned with the rich internal state you have cultivated with diligence, focus, and unwavering consistency. Emotional alignment is the secret ingredient that transforms assumption into tangible wealth, because it is not enough to simply think or visualize richness. The feeling of having must saturate every fiber of your being, creating an undeniable resonance that the subconscious can act upon. And when your emotions are fully engaged, the mind treats the assumed reality as fact, responding by orchestrating circumstances, opportunities, and encounters that mirror that state. And this is why many people struggle despite intellectual understanding of wealth manifestation. They lack the emotional conviction to solidify the assumption, which renders their efforts ineffective. And the process of aligning emotion with assumption requires deliberate attention to how you feel about money, abundance, and personal value. Because every thought and emotion carries energy that attracts or repels experiences. And when you cultivate consistent feelings of excitement, confidence, and certainty, you accelerate manifestations exponentially. And as this practice deepens, you begin to notice subtle shifts in daily life, from unexpected financial solutions to synchronistic opportunities, all reflecting the internal emotional alignment you maintain. And the fascinating part is that emotion acts as both amplifier and compass, guiding the subconscious toward consistent manifestation, while also reinforcing belief and expectation. And the more frequently you engage in this emotional alignment, the more effortless and automatic manifestations become, because your inner state is clear, consistent, and unshakable. And challenges or temporary setbacks no longer derail your trajectory, but instead become signals to refine and strengthen your feeling of having. And as emotional alignment compounds, your life begins to move with a natural flow. Opportunities appear with perfect timing, and the external world becomes a reflection of your internal richness. And this is why cultivating joy, excitement, gratitude, and certainty in every thought about wealth is essential, because these emotions solidify the assumption, turning it into a lived, undeniable reality. And once mastered, this emotional consistency ensures that abundance is not contingent on external events, but arises inevitably from the state you inhabit internally, creating a life in which wealth, freedom, and opportunity flow continuously, naturally, and effortlessly, demonstrating that the ultimate power of manifestation lies in the harmony between assumption, emotion, and unwavering inner certainty. At the culmination of understanding the law of assumption, you realize that true wealth is not a distant goal, an external prize, or a product of effort alone, but the natural outcome of living, thinking, and feeling as though abundance is already your present reality. And when you consistently inhabit this state, your life becomes a coherent reflection of the assumptions you maintain, where money, opportunity, and success flow effortlessly because the inner blueprint has been firmly established. And the beauty of this principle is that it transcends circumstance, timing, and struggle, working quietly yet powerfully beneath the surface of everyday life, aligning events, people, and resources to match the certainty you carry. And the moment you embrace this truth fully, the sense of lack that once dominated thought and decision-making dissolves, replaced by a deep, unwavering confidence that every need, desire, and opportunity is already provided for. And this confidence allows you to act decisively, creatively, and effortlessly, because the mind now operates from a foundation of certainty rather than fear, hesitation, or doubt. And as the days pass, you notice a harmony in life where synchronicities, fortuitous encounters, and unexpected solutions become commonplace, all of which are manifestations of the internal state you have deliberately cultivated. And the power of this practice lies in its subtlety, because it does not rely on external validation, frantic effort, or visible struggle, but on the quiet, consistent, and fully felt assumption of abundance that guides every thought, feeling, and action. And when emotional alignment, gratitude, sleep programming, environmental awareness, self-worth, and deliberate focus converge with this assumption, manifestation becomes effortless, continuous, and inevitable, creating a life where wealth, opportunity, and freedom are not temporary achievements but natural expressions of the consciousness you maintain. And the final insight is that every challenge, delay, or apparent obstacle is not a signal of failure, but a mirror reflecting areas where assumptions can be strengthened, refined, and embodied more fully. And as you master this process, every day becomes an exercise in deliberate creation, where each choice, each thought, and each feeling contributes to a reality that mirrors the richness you assume internally. And this understanding transforms not only finances but relationships, health, personal growth, and overall experience, proving that the law of assumption operates universally, elegantly, and unfailingly. And when you combine clarity, emotional conviction, consistency, and gratitude, your life evolves into a seamless, unstoppable flow of abundance, proving once and for all that wealth is not something you pursue externally, but something you inhabit internally. And once inhabited, it expresses effortlessly in every area of life, leaving no doubt that the only true barrier to prosperity was the assumption you held. And now that it has been consciously chosen, every corner of your life reflects the certainty, richness, and freedom that has always been your birthright, completing the journey from scarcity to abundance, from uncertainty to unwavering certainty, and from passive wishing to deliberate, unstoppable creation.